I have white powder on my hands. It's October of 2001, and I have an unknown white powder on my hands, and I have no idea how it got there. I am standing in the middle of a convention center in Chicago, filled with thousands of people. And as the panic wells up in me, all I can think of is, what the hell am I supposed to do now? I started with the International Association of Food Industry Suppliers, a trade association, in the fall of '99. They hired me to be their cybrarian. Sounded really fancy and really important, and they had no idea what the job was. This actually worked out great because I got to create my own job. Mostly it ended up with me taking over the website and doing research for staff and for people at our member companies. And this was a change for me. I'd mostly worked in straight nonprofits, but it was a fun group of people. I particularly liked roughly every other Friday, one of the vice presidents would come around about 3:30 and say, we're going to the conference room. They'd open a couple of bottles of wine and we'd just sit and talk. But it was kind of a strange place for me to be, but they were nice people and I enjoyed it. The main revenue that they got, obviously, was from dues from our member companies. And the reason they paid those dues was so that they could come to the biennial conference that they held at McCormick Place in Chicago, one of the largest conventions of the type in the world. And when they have these things, I just missed out on the one when I was hired in '99. They had just wrapped it up. So my first one was going to be in 2001. As it happens, it was scheduled for about 6 weeks after the 9/11 attacks. And it became clear to us very quickly that this was going to cause a problem. A lot of our exhibitors and a lot of our attendees were coming in from overseas. And because of the new travel restrictions and because of new shipping restrictions, the people weren't going to be able to make it in some cases. The machinery that they were coming to showcase wasn't going to be available to ship into the country. So there was discussion whether we even hold the show at all. But finally, the president and the board decided it's more important that the show go on and that we stay strong. So we did. Now, my coworkers who'd been there for a while all warned me that this was going to be a hectic week. It didn't matter what your job was in the office. When you are in Chicago, when you're at McCormick Place, it is all hands on deck and you could be asked to do anything under the sun. It was going to be 12, 14-hour days, most of it on your feet. So I was ready, but it was even more hectic than I thought it was going to be. And I found myself running on nothing but adrenaline and coffee most of the time. I got to do a lot of things. I helped with logistics, coordinating with the various actors and companies and the staff of the convention center itself. I helped coordinate move-in, making sure that people had electricity at their booths. I staffed the registration desk. I staffed the information desk. And when I wasn't doing things like that, I was out walking the floor as one of the people running the convention, there to help with any problems that might arise. So the second or third day, I'd been up for a good, I don't know, 8 hours running around the floor, and I was sent to staff the information booth again. I was the only one there, and as luck would have it, there was a lull. There was nobody coming around. So I ducked into the back and grabbed myself a cup of coffee. Came back out, still nobody around, so I'm looking for something to do. There was always something to do. So I put my coffee down and I saw, oh, here are some registration forms that haven't been filed yet. So I moved some envelopes out of the way and I brought the registration forms and I picked the first one up, and that's when I noticed the white powder. Now, as I said, this was October of '01. The first anthrax letters that went to NBC had been a month before. The letters that went to the Senate had happened that week. And the media had been filled with stories of this white powder and what it looked like and how it could vary and how deadly it was. So I froze for a moment and panicked. And then I saw one of my supervisors, Greg, and I waved him over, showed him the white powder on my finger, and he ran to get a police officer. The officer came over, took a look at my white powder, ushered us into the back, and said, all right, so here's what's going to happen. I need to ask you a few questions, determine whether or not this is a legitimate threat. If it is, I'm going to call it in. We will shut down the convention center. No one will be allowed in or out. You will be taken to quarantine, and then we're going to bring the feds in. This is serious. So he said, all right, so what were you doing when you noticed the white powder? Well, that's just it. I was moving envelopes and papers, and I don't know what it could have been. He said, all right. So you're not sure where it came from. What were you doing before you picked up these envelopes? I said, well, I just got myself a cup of coffee. And the officer looked over to the little station with the coffee maker and the sugar and the dry creamer. He took a little out, poured it on his own hand, and said, let's compare. It matched up. I was relieved, obviously. And when I told the rest of the staff later that night, we all got a good, if somewhat nervous, laugh out of it. And my bosses all told me that they were proud that I'd spoken up, even if it had just been a false alarm. As Richard told us earlier this evening, every false alarm is good practice. So I wish I could tell you about all of the wonderful conventions that I've staffed since, but that was the only one I got to do. Because of the economic downturn, many companies didn't renew, and by early December it became clear that drastic measures had to be taken. They let about a quarter of the staff go, including me. They were incredibly nice, gave me a very generous severance package considering I'd only been working there 2 years. Allowed me to come in and use my old work computer to find another job. But the one thing that it did allow me was I had plenty of time to get coffee.